What's up, everybody? It's Zach, Tennis Pro Doc, helping you improve your game with science. And I'm here at Glen Creek Tennis Club. My buddy Mike just hooked me up with the Wilson Ultra 100, the third generation. And I am so excited to try this racket out, as I have never had any experience with this racket or its predecessors. But I get more comments about this racket than almost any other in my comments section during my racket reviews. So I'm going to put this thing through the absolute gauntlet to see if this racket is really worth all the talk that it gets. Here we go. Now, we'll get into the specs of this frame during the side-by-side serve and suicide test. However, suffice it to say, this racket is just a little bit different from a manufacturing construction standpoint than some of the other frames that we've been testing out this year during our search for a new tennis racket. However, I'd love to know your opinion after the video. Do you think that this racket is worth a demo for you? So first, just to get some raw data on the side-by-side test, average forehand and backhand miles per hour versus my current RF97. I was at 57.8 miles per hour on the Ultra 100 versus 58.9 miles per hour on the RF97. And on the serve test, my average flat serve miles per hour on the Ultra was 85.5 miles per hour versus 89.5 miles per hour on the RF97. Average second serve speed was 74 miles per hour on the Ultra versus 78.9 on the RF97. But the real jaw-dropper statistic on this racket was kick serve height, 147.3 centimeters average on the Ultra versus 133.9 on the RF. I got more kick serve height off this racket than any other I have tried, and it wasn't even close. Now, as you can see on the serve test as well as the side-by-side test, I was not getting as many miles per hour or kilometers per hour as I was in the RF97 or a lot of the other rackets I've tried this year, but I was getting much more spin potential from the Ultra. I think there's a few reasons for that. Number one, obviously 100 square inch hoop, 16 by 19 pattern, but I think the biggest reason for the divergence in these numbers is just the overall construction of the frame. Remember, this thing comes off the factory floor at 7 points head light, kick that down to 4 points once you string it, and only 11.2 ounces, plus a stiffness rating of 73, which is really high, and you get a racket with a really big trampoline effect, a lot like the old Hyper Hammer frames from Wilson, and that's where you're getting that big moonball effect, but just not a lot of pace. Now, first impressions playing with the Ultra, I am noticing I'm getting a lot of speed with the racket and a lot of elasticity. I'm not getting a ton of weight on the ball. As when I'm hitting with my dad, he also just pointed out that typically my balls are coming over with a little more weight when I'm hitting with my RF97. And on these balls, he's just noticing they're popping up into his strike zone. It's just a little bit easier for him to find the ball when I'm playing with this racket. So it's kind of giving him an advantage. Now, as I started playing in the Ultra more, I started realizing its capabilities and its limitations. Number one, if you play really far back on the baseline, or if you're a retriever, maybe you chip a lot of balls back, you're going to find some things you like in this racket. Just because even when chipping the ball back, I was able to get a lot of depth on the ball, and it was coming over with a little bit of zip. I just noticed if I was even just trying to get a little bit of the string bed on it, just reaching for a ball, I noticed I could usually get it back pretty deep, versus my RF or some other rackets where sometimes the ball would just dribble off of it if I didn't really give it some oomph. So because I couldn't get as much weight on my shots, like I said earlier, I started trying to swing harder. And when I started to swing harder, my ball started to sail more. So when my ball started to sail more, I started putting more forearm into the ball and trying to get more spin. My elbows started coming in closer to my body. And guess what? My shots started landing short then, and I was getting pummeled on short balls. So for me, as someone who is used to playing with more of a player's racket, more of a heavier racket, I wasn't getting that pocketing of the racket that I like. And I just was noticing that I wasn't able to use the depth that this racket can give you with how full my stroke is. So I will say, if you're someone that's used to playing with a racket with a lot of feel, a lot of pocketing, and just a racket that allows you to have a little more of that pinpoint precision, this racket is not going to feel so great in your hands just because the ball can trampoline on you so easily. Now, on slice backhands, this racket actually did really well in my hands. I was able to get a lot of zip on it without having to really take a huge stroke back. So my slice backhands actually ended up driving through the court pretty well. Up at net, this racket is actually pretty good. You're not going to get the deft touch of some other rackets, but for drive volleys, this thing is actually going to feel pretty sharp in your hands. You just really have to make sure at impact that you have a solid wrist or the ball will pop. Now, on the suicide test measuring the racket's maneuverability, I will say this racket is not the most maneuverable frame. Even though its swing weight is only a 312, just the balance of the racket when you're moving up into the court, it is just kind of hard to get the racket in the position that you want it to. Now, coming back from the net, hitting shots off my back foot, I did notice I was really having to put a lot of shoulder into the ball to get it to go over the way I like it, versus some other frames that have a higher swing weight, then I'm really able to push through the ball even off of my back foot. But if I had to describe this racket in one word, it would be tinny or kind of metallic. This frame just doesn't give you a lot of pocketing, doesn't give you a lot of feel. It does give you a lot of spin and a lot of access to depth. not so much weight. That's why I was saying, if you're someone that really likes to push people around from the baseline or use your weight of shot, you're gonna find it hard to win points with this frame. However, if you're more of a retriever or someone that just slices and dices a little more, then this frame is actually gonna help you a little bit by just giving you a little more easy depth. I didn't find that this racket gave me easy pace whatsoever, even though that's kind of what they say on the Wilson website. I found you get easy depth, just not pace. So who do I think this racket is good for and who do I think it's not so good for? I actually had to think about this one a little bit. I think if you do have shorter strokes, even if you play a little higher level doubles, I think if you're someone with shorter strokes, I do think this racket will actually give you a little something even if you are playing quicker doubles, just because you can drive volleys really well with this racket. And on quick reactions on serve return, I do think this racket's gonna be good if you chip that return to try to keep it low more. Now, I also think this racket is good for someone who is more of a baseline grinder who does not have that really full, fast stroke. Now, there are some players, at least I play against, that do not have a really fast and full stroke. One person that comes to mind is my buddy Brant, who really stalks the back of the court and is a retriever, and a lot of times he beats me just because he gets everything of mine back. He's not trying to win the battle of court position. He's not trying to push me around with weight of shot. He is just trying to get me in a position where I feel more awkward and I end up making errors. So someone like that, and he is a really high level player, and a frame like this that gives him a little more access to depth would really give him a little more of an advantage over players like me who are trying to win the battle of court position and trying to push people around on weight of shot. But if you're someone that stalks the baseline, is an all-court player, or someone that really likes to hit big shots, this racket is just going to be a little bit too much for you. You're just not going to get that control. There are just other better frames for those kind of players that can create more angles, open up the court more, and just give you a little more peace of mind that you can start swinging out and the ball is still going to drop in. Now, if I were going to buy this racket, what would I do to customize it? Now, the first part of this might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but just stay with me. I actually think, this is just my demonstration racket, I think I would add lead to 3 and 9 just to try to increase a little more of the pocketing, a little more of the feel, a little bit more solidity at impact. But then, I also think, let's just say this right here is lead tape. I would just... You wonder why Wilson doesn't send me stuff to review. But in all honesty, I would just try to add a lot of mass to the handle. I probably would put a leather grip on this, maybe if you can, a little silicone in there, and just some lead tape. Just something to give me a little bit more mass in the handle, just to give me a little bit more maneuverability in the mid-court and forecourt. Now, one other interesting thing about the Ultra, now I am not a spot server. I typically try to jam my opponents with some combination of topspin and slice, or I try to kick it away from them and then I win the court position battle from there, or at least I try to. Now on the Ultra, I found that my opponents were able to step aside from my serve a lot easier and get out of the way of it quicker and then start to come down it with their rackets. Now, I found when I started trying to spot serve with the Ultra, the top spin and the spin potential that it has was then really able to knock my opponents off balance. It was just, I had to try to learn to serve in a different way to use the racket to my advantage. So it actually was a little bit difficult, but once I was able to do it, it actually worked for me. All right, so I have a couple really big head-to-head racket reviews coming up, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, if you want to be the first to see those videos. Otherwise, hope you have a great day, great night, wherever in the world you are tuning in from. I'll see you in the next video.